Imagine this. You're 11 years old, sitting at your kitchen table eating cereal, when suddenly an eagle crashes through your window, carrying a letter in its talons. Not an owl, an eagle. Because this isn't Hogwarts. This is the American School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. And we're about to discover what magical education would look like if it had been born in the land of the free and the home of the brave. What if instead of a castle in the Scottish Highlands, young American witches and wizards attended school in a completely different setting? What if the sorting ceremony involved a multiple-choice test? What if Quidditch was replaced with something even more intense? Today, we're going to reimagine every single aspect of the Harry Potter universe through an American lens. And trust me, things are going to get wild. Before we dive into this magical transformation, let's establish something important. The United States is massive. We're talking about a country that spans from the Atlantic to the Pacific, encompasses multiple time zones, and has a population nearly 5 times larger than the United Kingdom. So right off the bat, we need to address the elephant in the room. There's no way America would have just one magical school. No chance. The very idea goes against everything America stands for. We're talking about a nation built on expansion, diversity, and let's be honest, a little bit of competitive spirit. So forget everything you know about Hogwarts being the one and only option. In America, we'd have multiple schools, and they'd all be competing with each other. Let's start with location. Where would these schools actually be? Well, think about the American education system. We have public schools, private schools, charter schools, and everything in between. The magical education system would likely mirror this structure. You'd probably have a few elite, prestigious magical academies that are incredibly hard to get into. Think of them as the Harvard and Yale of the wizarding world. These would be your East Coast establishments. Probably one nestled somewhere in the Appalachian Mountains, shrouded in mist and mystery, and another possibly hidden in plain sight in New England. Glamored to look like just another prestigious boarding school to the non-magical eye. But then you'd also have your state magical schools. California would definitely have its own academy, probably built into the redwood forests or hidden somewhere in the Sierra Nevada mountains. Texas would absolutely insist on having the biggest magical school naturally. Everything's bigger in Texas, even wizard schools. You'd have schools in the Pacific Northwest, the Great Lakes region, the Southwest. Each one would have its own distinct flavor, its own unique approach to magical education, reflecting the regional culture of its location. Now, let's talk about what these schools would actually look like. Here's where things get really interesting. Hogwarts is a medieval castle, right? It's got that ancient, timeless Gothic architecture that screams old-world magic. But America doesn't really do medieval castles. That's not our aesthetic. So what would an American magical school look like? Well, it depends on the region and the type of school we're talking about. The East Coast elite schools might go for a colonial or neo-Gothic style, trying to capture some of that old-world prestige. Think ivy-covered brick buildings, white columns, sprawling quads. It would look like it could be part of an Ivy League campus, which is exactly the point. These schools would want to project an image of tradition and excellence, even if that tradition only goes back a couple of hundred years instead of 1,000. But out west? That's where things would get really different. A California magical academy might be built into the landscape itself, with buildings made of glass and reclaimed wood, solar panels everywhere because even wizards care about the environment in California. The architecture would be open, modern, designed to blur the line between indoor and outdoor spaces. There might be outdoor classrooms, meditation gardens, and probably a coffee shop on campus that serves artisanal potions. A Texas magical school would be massive and probably incorporate ranch or mission-style architecture. Wide open spaces because land isn't exactly at a premium. There might even be stables for magical creatures that would make Hagrid jealous. Everything would be built on a grand scale, meant to impress and maybe intimidate just a little bit. And here's something that would be completely different from Hogwarts. American schools would almost certainly be more accessible. Hogwarts is this isolated castle that you can only reach by train or flying car or whatever. But American magical schools would probably be easier to get to, at least relatively speaking. There might be designated flu network stations in major cities, maybe even magical bus systems. The point is, American culture values convenience and accessibility in a way that the more traditional British magical world doesn't seem to prioritize. Let's talk about the campus culture because this is where American schools would really diverge from Hogwarts. At Hogwarts, you've got this very structured, traditional British boarding school atmosphere. Everyone wears robes, there are strict rules, and the whole place has this formal, almost medieval vibe. American magical schools would be so different. First of all, the dress code would be way more relaxed. Sure, maybe there would be some kind of uniform requirement at the more prestigious schools, but it would probably be more like khakis and a polo shirt situation rather than flowing robes. At the more laid-back schools, students might just wear regular clothes with maybe a school patch or something to identify them. The idea of everyone walking around in identical black robes and pointed hats, that's not very American. We like to express our individuality. The whole atmosphere would be different too. American schools, even boarding schools, tend to have a more casual relationship between students and teachers. At Hogwarts, you call teachers by their title and last name. Professor McGonagall, Professor Snape. It's all very formal. But at an American magical school, teachers might introduce themselves by their first names, or at least create a less intimidating atmosphere. There would be more of an emphasis on being approachable and building relationships with students rather than maintaining this distant, authoritative position. Office hours would absolutely be a thing. In American colleges, professors have office hours where students can drop by to ask questions or get help. This would definitely exist in American magical schools. Students would be encouraged to take advantage of these opportunities, to advocate for themselves, to ask for help when they need it. This is very much in line with American educational philosophy. Now let's get to one of the most important aspects of any magical school, the house system. The sorting ceremony at Hogwarts is iconic. The sorting hat literally reads your mind and places you into one of 4 houses based on your personality traits and values. It's dramatic, it's mystical, and it's completely at odds with how Americans tend to do things. Here's the thing about America. We love choices. We love agency. We love the idea that we control our own destiny. So the idea of a magical hat making life decisions for 11-year-olds? That might not fly. Instead, imagine this. New students arrive at school and they take a comprehensive magical aptitude test. I'm talking Scantron forms, number 2 pencils, the whole 9 yards. Because if there's one thing Americans love almost as much as choices, it's standardized testing. This test would assess not just personality traits but also magical strengths, learning styles, career interests, all of it. Then, based on the results, students would be given information about the different houses or tracks available at the school. And here's the kicker. They'd get to choose. Maybe there would be some guidance counseling involved, recommendations based on test results. But ultimately, the student would make the final decision about which house to join. Or maybe American schools would ditch the house system entirely and go with something more like academic tracks or majors. Instead of being sorted into Gryffindor or Slytherin, you might choose to focus on combat magic, or magical creatures, or potion chemistry, or magical engineering. You'd still have your core classes that everyone has to take, but you'd also have this specialization that reflects your interests and career goals. This is much more in line with how American education works, especially at the high school and college level. But let's say some schools did keep a house system. What would the houses be? They definitely wouldn't be named after the 4 founders because, well, there wouldn't be 4 medieval founders. The schools would be much newer. So what values would American magical houses represent? You might have houses based on different aspects of American identity and values. Maybe one house would be for the innovators and entrepreneurs, students who are all about pushing boundaries and creating new magical technologies. Another house might be for the protectors and defenders, students who want to go into magical law enforcement or defense. You could have a house for healers and nurturers, students interested in magical medicine and creature care. And maybe a house for scholars and researchers, the students who want to understand the theoretical underpinnings of magic. Or the houses could be regionally themed, especially at schools that draw from across the country. An East Coast house, a West Coast house, a Midwest house, a Southern house. Each one would celebrate the magical traditions and cultures of its region. This would create some interesting dynamics and definitely some rivalry. But it would also help students from different parts of the country connect with others who share their background. The house competition would probably be intense, maybe even more intense than at Hogwarts. Americans are competitive by nature. Every school event would be turned into a competition. Sports, academics, community service, you name it. There would be points, systems, and rankings, and probably live leaderboards displayed throughout the school, because Americans love metrics and tracking progress. Speaking of competition, let's talk about Quidditch. Or rather, let's talk about why Quidditch probably wouldn't exist in American magical schools, at least not in the same form. Quidditch is a very British sport. It's got weird rules. It's been played the same way for centuries, and it doesn't really make sense if you think about it too hard. The fact that catching the snitch is worth 150 points and basically determines the winner of almost every match? That's not really how Americans like their sports. American magical schools would probably invent their own flying sport, or they would adapt Quidditch so heavily that it would be unrecognizable. Imagine a version of Quidditch that's more like American football. More physical contact allowed, more positions, more complex plays and strategies. The snitch might still exist, but catching it might only be worth like 20 points instead of 150, so the rest of the game actually matters. There would definitely be instant replay and probably some magical equivalent of stadium jumbotrons showing highlights and replays, or maybe the sport would be completely different. Maybe instead of flying on brooms, American wizards would fly on something else entirely. Enchanted skateboards for a West Coast school, magical surfboards. Honestly, the possibilities are endless. The point is, Americans would take one look at Quidditch and say, you know what? We can make this better, more exciting, more strategic, and they'd completely reinvent it. But it wouldn't just be about flying sports. American schools would have a whole athletics program. Magical basketball. Enchanted baseball where the balls curve in impossible ways and the bats always hit sweet spots. Wizard football where tackles involve actual magic. There would be different sports for different seasons, just like in non-magical American schools. There would be pep rallies and homecoming games and March Madness-style tournament brackets for the national championship. The school spirit would be on another level. Americans take school spirit very seriously. There would be fight songs, mascots, probably cheerleading squads performing magical stunts. Students would paint their faces in school colors for big games. Alumni would come back for homecoming weekend. The whole thing would be this massive production that's about so much more than just the sport itself. It's about community, identity, tradition, and pride. Now let's talk about the actual education, the classes, and curriculum. Hogwarts has a pretty traditional approach to magical education. You take the same core classes for 5 years, then you specialize a bit for your remaining years. The subjects are things like transfiguration, potions, charms, defense against the dark arts. Very foundational, very focused on specific magical disciplines. American magical schools would approach this differently. First of all, there would be way more emphasis on choice and personalization. Even in the early years, students would probably have some electives they could choose from. The whole idea of everyone taking the exact same classes until 5th year, that wouldn't fly. American education is all about discovering your interests and talents early and then developing them. The core curriculum would probably be similar in some ways. You'd still need to learn basic magical theory, spellcasting, potions, and so on, but the approach would be different. There would be more emphasis on practical application. Americans are pragmatic. We want to know, okay, I'm learning this, but what am I going to do with it? How does this apply to real life? So instead of just learning transfiguration theory, you might take a class called Applied Transformation Magic, where you learn how transfiguration is used in magical construction, manufacturing, and design. Instead of just potions, you might have magical chemistry and pharmaceutical magic. The classes would be framed in terms of careers and real-world applications. Defense against the dark arts would probably be completely overhauled. In America, this class would be way more intense and practical. We're talking full combat training, simulated dangerous situations, maybe even something like magical ROTC programs for students interested in magical law enforcement or military applications. The idea would be to actually prepare students to defend themselves and others, not just teach them a few defensive spells. And here's something that would definitely be different. Business and entrepreneurship classes. American culture celebrates entrepreneurship and innovation, so there would absolutely be classes on magical business, marketing, intellectual property in the magical world, how to start your own magical company. Students would be encouraged to think about how they can monetize their magical abilities. The American dream applies to wizards too. There would also probably be more integration of technology and magic. At Hogwarts, technology doesn't work because of all the magical interference. But American wizards would look at that and say, well, let's figure out how to make them work together. There would be research into combining technology and magic, classes on magical engineering and computer science. The goal would be innovation and progress, not maintaining tradition for tradition's sake. The grading system would be different too. Hogwarts uses this ordinary wizarding levels and nastily exhausting wizarding tests system. It's very British, very formal. American schools would probably use something more familiar. Letter grades, GPAs, class rankings. There would be honors classes and AP equivalents for advanced students. Standardized testing would definitely be involved. There might be some magical equivalent of the SATs that students have to take before applying to magical colleges or universities. Oh yeah, and that's another thing. The education wouldn't stop at the equivalent of high school. There would absolutely be magical colleges and universities in America, specialized graduate programs for advanced magical study. You'd have pre-med tracks for aspiring magical healers, law programs for future magical lawyers, MBA programs for witches and wizards who want to go into magical business. The whole structure would mirror the American educational system, which doesn't really end at 18. Let's talk about school rules and discipline because this would be wildly different from Hogwarts. Hogwarts has some pretty serious rules and some pretty serious punishments. Students can get expelled. They can lose massive amounts of house points. They get sent into the Forbidden Forest at night as detention, which is honestly kind of insane when you think about it. American schools would approach discipline differently, mostly because they'd have to deal with American parents and potentially lawsuits. The rules would probably be more clearly codified, laid out in a student handbook that everyone receives on day one. There would be a clear progression of consequences. First offense, maybe a warning. Second offense, detention. Third offense, meeting with parents. That kind of thing. Expulsion would be much harder to achieve. There would need to be a formal process, probably involving hearings and appeals. Students might have the right to representation, maybe by a parent or advocate. The whole thing would be more bureaucratic and procedural because that's how the American legal system works, and it would influence how schools handle discipline. Detention itself would be different. Sending students into a dangerous forest? No way, that's a liability nightmare. Detention would probably involve boring but safe tasks, cleaning classrooms without magic, organizing the library, maybe community service like helping in the hospital wing or assisting with magical creature care. It would be supervised and structured. The relationship between students and rules would also be different. At Hogwarts, there's this culture of rule-breaking being almost celebrated if done for the right reasons. Harry, Ron, and Hermione break rules constantly and usually end up being rewarded for it in the long run. But American schools, especially in recent decades, have become increasingly focused on safety and liability. Breaking rules would be taken more seriously. There would be less tolerance for students wandering around after curfew or engaging in potentially dangerous activities. On the flip side, students might have more official channels for expressing concerns or challenging rules they think are unfair. There might be a student government with actual power to propose policy changes. Town halls where students can voice concerns to the administration. Americans value democracy and free speech, so there would probably be more opportunities for student input into how the school is run. Bullying would be handled very differently, too. At Hogwarts, bullying seems to be kind of tolerated as long as it doesn't get too extreme. Draco Malfoy torments Harry and his friends for 7 years with relatively few consequences. In modern American schools, there are anti-bullying policies, mandatory reporting requirements, intervention programs. A student like Draco would probably be in the counselor's office repeatedly. His parents would be called in. There might be restorative justice sessions. The whole approach would be more focused on intervention and behavior modification, rather than just punishment or ignoring the problem. Now, let's talk about daily life at an American magical school because this is where the cultural differences would really show up. Let's start with food. The Great Hall at Hogwarts is amazing with its floating candles and enchanted ceiling, and the food just magically appears on the tables. Very dramatic, very British. An American magical school might have something similar, but the food itself would be completely different. We're not talking about treacle tart and bangers and mash. We're talking about burgers, pizza, tacos, barbecue, depending on the region. There would be way more variety because American food culture is so diverse. You'd have different stations, like one for American classics, one for Mexican food, one for Asian cuisine. Maybe a vegetarian and vegan station because dietary restrictions and preferences are taken more seriously in American institutions. There would probably be more flexibility in when and where you eat too. Hogwarts has set meal times where everyone eats together in the Great Hall. American schools might have a cafeteria that's open for longer hours so students can eat when it fits their schedule. There might be food courts with different options. Definitely vending machines with magical snacks. Maybe even food delivery to the dorms because Americans love convenience. Speaking of dorms, let's talk about housing. At Hogwarts, students sleep in dormitories, multiple students to a room, separated by gender and house. It's very communal, very traditional boarding school. American magical schools would probably offer more options. At elite schools, you might start out in traditional dorms, but then move to suite-style housing as you get older, maybe even apartment-style accommodations for older students. The rooms would probably be more personalized. Students would be allowed and even encouraged to decorate, to make the space their own. There would be more privacy. Co-ed housing would probably be an option at many schools, not co-ed rooms necessarily, but mixed-gender dorms or floors. This is pretty common at American colleges and reflects more modern attitudes about gender and living arrangements. There would be more bathroom options too, not just communal bathrooms for each gender, but maybe private bathrooms or gender-neutral options. The dorms would have different amenities. Common rooms would be more like actual living spaces with comfortable furniture, TVs or their magical equivalent, gaming areas, study spaces. There might be kitchenettes because college students like to cook or at least make late-night snacks. Laundry facilities would definitely be in the dorms because nobody wants to haul their dirty robes across campus. Social life would be way more structured and official. At Hogwarts, students just kind of hang out. There are Quidditch matches and the Yule Ball, but not much else in terms of official social events. American schools would have constant events. Welcome week activities when you first arrive. Homecoming dances, spirit weeks, cultural celebration events, talent shows, open mic nights. The activities board would be constantly advertising new events and trying to get students involved. Student organizations would be huge. Clubs for every interest imaginable. Magical chess club, sure, but also debate team, student newspaper, yearbook committee, cultural organizations, academic honor societies, volunteer clubs, special interest groups. Americans love joining organizations and building communities around shared interests. Students would pad their resumes by joining multiple clubs and taking leadership positions. Greek life might even exist. Magical fraternities and sororities with their own houses, their own traditions, their own reputations. Rush Week would be this whole thing. There would be parties, mixers, social hierarchies. Some schools might ban Greek life to avoid the problems associated with it, but at others it would be a major part of campus culture. Dating culture would be more open and casual than at Hogwarts. At Hogwarts, relationships seem to be kind of a big deal. People ask each other to the Yule Ball weeks in advance. There's a lot of drama around who's dating who. American magical schools would probably have a more relaxed attitude. Dating apps might even exist in the wizarding world. Students would go on casual dates to the magical coffee shop or the village near campus. Relationships would form and dissolve with the typical drama of adolescence, but it wouldn't be this huge, scandalous thing every time. Technology would play a bigger role in social life. Even if phones don't work perfectly around magic, American wizards would figure out some workaround. Maybe magical communication devices that function like smartphones. Students would be texting each other, posting on magical social media, probably procrastinating by scrolling instead of doing homework. The idea of being completely cut off from communication when you're at school, like Hogwarts students or with their Muggle families, that wouldn't work for American kids who are used to being constantly connected. Parents would be more involved too. American parents, especially in recent generations, tend to be very involved in their kids' education. Helicopter parenting is a real phenomenon, so you'd have parents calling the school to complain about grades or check on their kids. Parents showing up for sports games and performances. Parent-teacher conferences would absolutely be a thing. The school would probably have to have pretty robust communication, systems to keep parents informed about what's happening. Let's talk about the staff and faculty because they would be pretty different from what we see at Hogwarts. At Hogwarts, you have this small group of teachers who each handle one subject and somehow manage to teach all 7 years' worth of students in that subject. The student-to-teacher ratio must be insane, and yet these same teachers also serve as heads of houses, supervise students, organize events, and apparently have time to get involved in fighting dark wizards. American schools would have way more staff. First of all, there would be more teachers. Multiple teachers per subject, so class sizes could be smaller. There would be teaching assistants, especially for the more advanced classes. More support staff overall. There would definitely be more administrative staff. A headmaster or headmistress, sure, but also assistant principals, deans of students, academic advisors, college counselors helping students plan for after graduation. There would be an HR department handling employee issues, an admissions office processing applications, a financial aid office because American education runs on financial aid and scholarships and student loans. Support services would be way more robust. School counselors and therapists because mental health is taken more seriously in American schools. Learning specialists for students who need academic support or accommodations. Probably a health center staffed with magical healers and nurses. Career counseling to help students figure out what they want to do after graduation. The faculty themselves would be different. At Hogwarts, teachers seem to be there forever. They're these institution figures who've been teaching the same subject for decades. American schools have more turnover. Teachers might stay for a few years, then move on to other opportunities. There would be younger teachers, people fresh out of their own magical education who are just starting their teaching careers. The faculty would be more diverse in terms of age, background, and teaching style. Academic freedom would be a bigger thing too. American professors, especially at the college level, have a lot of autonomy in how they teach their classes. So magical professors might have very different approaches to the same subject. One potions professor might be all about traditional brewing methods, while another is experimenting with modern shortcuts and innovations. Students might be able to choose between different sections of the same class based on the professor's teaching style or focus. Research would be emphasized more for faculty. Publish or perish is a real thing in American academia. Magical professors would be expected to not just teach but also conduct research, publish papers in magical journals, present at conferences. The prestigious schools would brag about their faculty's research accomplishments. This would actually be good for students because they'd be learning from people who are actively advancing magical knowledge, not just teaching the same material year after year. The hierarchy would be flatter. At Hogwarts, Dumbledore is in charge and what he says goes. There's not a lot of question about that. American schools would probably have more distributed leadership, faculty committees with real power, faculty senate meetings where professors can voice concerns about policies, more input from different stakeholders rather than just top-down decision-making. Let's talk about the relationship with the non-magical world, because this would be fundamentally different in America. In the Harry Potter series, the magical and non-magical worlds are very separate. Wizards hide from muggles. There are laws about not using magic in front of muggles. The whole wizarding world is this secret society that non-magical people don't know exists. This probably wouldn't work the same way in America. First of all, Americans are really bad at keeping secrets. We value transparency and freedom of information. The idea of maintaining this massive conspiracy to hide magic from millions of people, that seems unsustainable. There would probably be more integration between the magical and non-magical worlds, or at least more awareness. Maybe in America, non-magical people know that magic exists, but just don't have access to it themselves. It's like a specialized skill that some people have and others don't. This would create different social dynamics, but might be more stable than trying to completely hide an entire subset of the population. The schools would prepare students differently for life after graduation. At Hogwarts, students are basically only prepared to work in the wizarding world. They learn no non-magical skills. They're completely separated from Muggle society. American magical schools would probably offer more crossover, classes on how to navigate the non-magical world. Maybe even some basic non-magical skills like driving or using computers. The goal would be to prepare students to function in both worlds because that's more practical and more in line with American values of integration rather than separation. There would probably be more Muggle-born students in positions of influence and power. In the Harry Potter series, there's a lot of prejudice against Muggle-borns. They're seen as less than by some pureblood families. While prejudice would definitely still exist in America, the cultural values are different. America was founded on the idea that anyone can make it regardless of their background. The American dream, right? So, a Muggle-born wizard who works hard and shows talent would probably face less systematic discrimination than they would in Britain. That said, there would definitely be other forms of discrimination and inequality. American magical society would probably reflect the same racial and economic inequalities that exist in non-magical American society. There might be elite families who've been magical for generations and have accumulated wealth and power. There might be racial disparities in terms of who has access to the best magical education. Issues of economic inequality would definitely come into play. Not all magical schools would be equal. The rich kids would go to the elite private academies while everyone else would go to their state school. Financial aid and scholarships would be a huge deal. The cost of magical education would probably be substantial, and not every magical family could afford the top schools. So there would be scholarship programs, need-based financial aid, maybe even magical student loans that students would be paying off for years after graduation. The whole system would mirror the complicated and often inequitable way that non-magical American education is funded. Let's talk about school security because this is a huge topic in American schools. Hogwarts has some security. There are protective enchantments around the castle. Teachers patrol the halls. But overall, the security seems pretty lax considering that dark wizards keep trying to infiltrate the school. Students wander around unsupervised all the time. Secret passages go unchecked. The whole place seems like a security nightmare. American magical schools in the modern era would take security way more seriously. There would be way more supervision and monitoring. Magical security systems scanning everyone who enters the campus. ID cards or badges that students have to wear or carry. Maybe even magical metal detectors checking for dangerous items. Surveillance would be more extensive. Possibly magical cameras or scrying mirrors monitoring common areas. There would be strict protocols for who can enter campus. Background checks for all staff. Visitor policies requiring check-in and escort. Lockdown procedures in case of emergencies. Active shooter drills are a grim reality in American schools. And magical schools would probably have equivalent emergency preparation for dark wizard attacks or other threats. This would create a different atmosphere than Hogwarts. More secure maybe, but also less free. Students wouldn't be able to just wander wherever they want. There would be more rules about where you can go and when. The emphasis would be on keeping students safe, even if it meant sacrificing some of the freedom and adventure that makes Hogwarts feel so magical. Parent communication about security would be constant. After any incident, there would be emails and meetings updating parents on what happened and what steps are being taken to prevent it from happening again. Transparency would be key, even if it sometimes caused more panic than it prevented. Let's talk about the political environment of these schools, because politics would be more present in American magical education. At Hogwarts, politics exist in the background. The Ministry of Magic influences the school, especially during the later books. But for the most part, students aren't super politically engaged. They're not really encouraged to think critically about the government or society. American schools would be different. Critical thinking and civic engagement are valued in American education, at least in theory. Students would be encouraged to think about magical politics, to form their own opinions, to engage in debate. There would probably be political clubs, student activists, protests, and demonstrations about issues students care about. During election seasons, the political environment would be intense. Magical politicians might even visit campus to speak and rally support. There would be voter registration drives once students are old enough to vote. Political debates and discussions would happen in and out of class. Teachers might even incorporate current political events into their lessons to make the material more relevant. This would create some tension. Not everyone would agree politically. There would be conservative students and liberal students and everything in between. The school administration would have to figure out how to create an environment where different viewpoints can be expressed, while still maintaining some level of order and respect. This is something American schools and universities struggle with in the non-magical world. And magical schools would face the same challenges. Freedom of speech would be taken very seriously, probably more seriously than at Hogwarts. Students would feel entitled to express their opinions, even if those opinions are controversial or unpopular. This could lead to some heated situations, but it would also create a more dynamic intellectual environment where ideas are constantly being debated and challenged. Let's talk about holidays and breaks, because the school calendar would be pretty different. Hogwarts seems to have breaks at Christmas and Easter, plus the summer holiday. Pretty straightforward. American schools would have a more complicated calendar with more breaks and holidays. There would definitely be a winter break, but it would probably be called winter break rather than Christmas break to be more inclusive. Fall break and spring break would absolutely be things. Thanksgiving break would be substantial because Thanksgiving is a major American holiday. There might be long weekends throughout the year for various holidays. The school year itself might be structured differently. Instead of going from September to June, maybe it would go from August to May to match the typical American school calendar. Or some schools might experiment with quarter systems or trimester systems instead of traditional semesters. There would be more variety in how the academic year is structured. Summer break would be longer, probably a solid 3 months. But unlike Hogwarts, where students just go home and that's it, American magical students would have more options for summer. Summer programs at the school for students who want to get ahead or need extra help. Summer internships with magical companies or organizations. Summer camps for younger students. The whole concept of a productive summer where you're building skills and experiences would be emphasized. During breaks, especially winter and spring break, students might not even go home. Spring break in particular would be this whole thing. Groups of students might go on trips together, magical vacations to wizarding destinations around the world. There would definitely be stories of students getting into trouble during spring break that would become legends at the school. The school would also celebrate holidays differently. Halloween would be huge, probably bigger than at Hogwarts even, with elaborate decorations and parties and events. Thanksgiving might be celebrated with a big feast where students who can't go home for the break can still have that experience. Homecoming would be a major event with a dance, a big game, and alumni returning to campus. There would also be more awareness of diverse holidays. Not everyone celebrates Christmas, so the school would probably acknowledge Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, winter solstice, and other holidays. There might be cultural celebration events throughout the year where students can share and celebrate their heritage and traditions. This diversity would be seen as a strength, something to be celebrated rather than ignored. Let's talk about the relationship with magical creatures because this would reflect American attitudes toward animals and nature. At Hogwarts, care of magical creatures is an elective class taught by Hagrid, and it mostly involves learning about various magical creatures, some dangerous and some not. The Forbidden Forest is full of dangerous creatures that students are told to avoid. American magical schools would probably have a more extensive program around magical creatures. There might be multiple classes focusing on different aspects. One class on creature care and welfare, another on magical creature biology and behavior, maybe even a class on the ethical treatment of magical creatures and their rights. Animal welfare is taken pretty seriously in American culture, so there would probably be strict regulations about how magical creatures can be treated at school. Students wouldn't be allowed to just own any creature they want. There would be approved lists of suitable pets, regulations about their care, maybe even inspections to make sure creatures are being properly looked after. The school might have a magical creature sanctuary or rehabilitation center on campus where injured or orphaned creatures are cared for. Students could volunteer or intern there, learning hands-on skills while also contributing to conservation efforts. This would tie into the American value of environmentalism and conservation. Field trips would be a big part of magical creature education. Trips to magical creature habitats, visits to creature reserves, maybe even international trips to see creatures that only exist in certain parts of the world. The goal would be hands-on learning and real-world experience, not just reading about creatures in books. There would also probably be more integration of creature care with other subjects. A potions class might discuss the ethics of using creature parts in potions. A magical history class might cover the relationship between wizards and creatures throughout American magical history, including mistakes and injustices that were committed. The approach would be more holistic and cross-disciplinary. Now let's talk about magical transportation, because this would be adapted to American geography and culture. At Hogwarts, students take the Hogwarts Express, a train that leaves from King's Cross Station in London. It's charming and traditional and very British, but America is huge, and American culture has a different relationship with transportation. First of all, there probably wouldn't be a single train that all students take to get to school. Students coming from all over the country would need different transportation options. There might be several magical train lines that connect major cities to school, or maybe magical buses like the night bus, but designed for longer distances and student transport. Flying would probably be more common as a mode of magical transportation. Americans love flying. We have a huge aviation industry, so maybe there would be magical airlines or chartered flights for students. Broomstick flying for long distances would probably be less common though, just not practical for cross-country travel. Flu Network would definitely exist and be more widely used. It's basically instant transportation through fireplaces, which is incredibly convenient. American wizards would probably have an extensive flu network connecting homes to designated arrival points near the school. It would be regulated with scheduled times for student arrivals to avoid congestion. Apparition, the ability to teleport, would be taught earlier and more extensively. Americans value independence and self-sufficiency. Learning to apparate would be seen as an important life skill. like learning to drive in the non-magical world. There would be classes, licensing exams, the whole deal. Once students are licensed, they might be allowed to operate on and off campus within certain restrictions. Parking lots would exist at schools where flying is allowed to campus. Students who are old enough and have the means might fly their own broomsticks or magical vehicles to school. There would be designated parking areas, probably with security. Maybe even premium parking spots that seniors get to claim. This mirrors how American high schools and colleges deal with student vehicles. The whole infrastructure around transportation would be more developed and regulated. There would be magical departments of transportation overseeing safety standards, regular maintenance checks for magical vehicles, traffic laws for broom flying. It would be more bureaucratic and organized than the somewhat chaotic transportation systems we see in the Harry Potter world. Let's talk about the arts at American magical schools because this would be huge. Americans value creative expression in the arts. There would be way more opportunities for artistic students than we see at Hogwarts. Yes, there's the choir at Hogwarts, but that's about it in terms of arts programs. American magical schools would have extensive music programs. Not just a choir, but also band, orchestra, maybe even a jazz ensemble or a rock band. Students would learn magical music, sure, but also non-magical music. There would be concerts and performances throughout the year. Maybe even musical theater productions. Imagine a magical version of a high school musical where the special effects are actual magic. The drama would be next level. Visual arts would be big too. Classes in magical painting where the portraits actually move. Sculpture using transfiguration. Photography with developing potions and enchanted cameras. Digital art where magic and technology combine. The school would have art galleries displaying student work. There might be annual art shows where parents and the community can come see what students have created. Creative writing would be encouraged. The school would probably have a literary magazine publishing student work, writing contests and competitions, maybe even classes specifically on magical creative writing, how to craft compelling stories that incorporate magical elements. Young adult fiction is huge in America, so students might even be trying to get their work published professionally while still in school. There would be more overlap between arts and other subjects too. A transfiguration project might involve creating a piece of art. A history class might require students to create a creative presentation rather than just writing an essay. The value placed on creativity would permeate the whole educational experience. Performance opportunities would be constant. Open mic nights where students can perform music, poetry, comedy, whatever. Talent shows that everyone gets excited about. Film festivals showcasing student films, which would be incredible when you add magic to cinematography. The school would see value in giving students platforms to express themselves and share their talents. Let's talk about academic pressure because this would be intense at American magical schools, maybe even more intense than at Hogwarts. American students face enormous pressure to succeed academically, to get into good colleges, to prepare for competitive careers. This pressure would absolutely translate to magical schools. There would be academic tracking, with some students in advanced or honors classes and others in standard classes. This creates hierarchy and can be really stressful for students who feel pressure to be in the top tracks. Students would be constantly comparing themselves to their peers, worrying about class rank and GPA. Test anxiety would be a real issue. With all the standardized testing we talked about earlier, students would be stressed about performing well on exams that could affect their future opportunities. There would be test prep courses, tutoring services, students studying late into the night trying to memorize spells and potion recipes and magical theory. College admissions would loom large, especially for older students. The pressure to build an impressive resume with extracurriculars, leadership positions, volunteer work, all while maintaining excellent grades. Students would be thinking about their college applications from early in their school career, trying to craft a narrative about who they are and what they want to do. Some students would struggle with this pressure. Mental health issues related to academic stress would be more visible than at Hogwarts. The school would hopefully have resources to help, counseling services and stress management programs, but the pressure would still be there. The competitive culture would be hard to escape. On the flip side, there would also be more emphasis on finding your own path and following your passions. American culture values individualism and personal fulfillment, so while there would be pressure to succeed, there would also be messaging about doing what makes you happy, finding your passion, being true to yourself. Some students would reject the traditional path and forge their own way. maybe taking a gap year before magical college or going straight into starting their own magical business. Let's talk about diversity and inclusion, because this would be approached very differently than at Hogwarts. The Harry Potter series does have some diversity, but it's not really explored in depth. American magical schools would have to grapple with diversity and inclusion in much more direct ways. First of all, the student body would be incredibly diverse, reflecting America's multicultural population. Students from different racial and ethnic backgrounds, different religions, different socioeconomic classes, different regions of the country. This diversity would be visible and present in a way it isn't at Hogwarts. There would be ongoing conversations about inclusion and equity, diversity training for staff and students, discussions about representation in curriculum, questions about whose magical traditions and histories are being taught and whose are being left out. These conversations would sometimes be uncomfortable, but they would be happening. Student organizations focused on identity and community would be common. Black student unions, Latino student associations, Asian American student groups, LGBTQ organizations, religious groups. These organizations would provide community and support for students, organize cultural events, and sometimes advocate for changes to school policies. The school would celebrate diversity through programming and events. Multicultural weeks where different cultures are highlighted and celebrated. Heritage months following the American tradition of recognizing different communities throughout the year. The cafeteria would serve diverse food options. The library would stock books representing diverse perspectives and stories. There would also be awareness of the ways that magical ability or magical heritage intersect with other identities. A Muggle-born student of color might face different challenges than a white Muggle-born student. Economic inequality would affect who has access to the best education and resources. These intersections would be part of the conversation. Accessibility would be taken seriously too. American schools are required by law to provide accommodations for students with disabilities, and magical schools would have to do the same. Magical accommodations for students with learning differences, physical disabilities, or other needs. The goal would be to ensure that every student has the opportunity to succeed regardless of their circumstances. Of course, all of this would be imperfect. There would be students and staff who resist these efforts. Incidents of discrimination or bias would occur. The school would have to figure out how to handle these situations, educate those involved, and keep working toward being a more inclusive community. It would be an ongoing process, not something that gets solved and then forgotten about. Let's talk about school traditions, because every American school loves its traditions. Some would be adapted from Hogwarts, but many would be uniquely American. Homecoming would be huge, maybe the biggest event of the fall semester. There would be a homecoming game, a dance, Spirit Week leading up to it, the crowning of homecoming royalty. Alumni would return to campus. There would be tailgating or its magical equivalent. The whole thing would be this massive celebration of school spirit. Prom would probably exist, especially for older students. It would be formal and elaborate. Students would spend weeks planning what to wear, who to go with, how to ask their date in creative ways. There would be a prom committee decorating the venue with a theme. After prom parties that the school may or may not officially sanction. All the drama and excitement that comes with American prom culture. Senior year would have its own special traditions. Senior sunrise and senior sunset. Events where the graduating class gathers to watch the sunrise on their first day and the sunset on their last day. Senior prank day, where the graduating class pulls an elaborate prank on the school, hopefully harmless but memorable. Senior skip day, where seniors collectively don't come to class, and the school just kind of accepts it as tradition. Graduation would be a huge ceremony. Everyone would wear caps and gowns, probably in school colors. There would be speeches from the valedictorian and salutatorian, maybe a notable magical figure as a keynote speaker. Students would walk across the stage to receive their diplomas while their families cheer. After the ceremony, there would be parties and celebrations. Some families might even host graduation parties for their student, another American tradition. There would be rivalry traditions with other magical schools. The annual game or competition where you play your biggest rival. Students would spend weeks hyping themselves up for it, creating signs and banners, talking trash about the other school. There might even be a trophy that goes to the winning school each year, proudly displayed until the next competition. Seasonal traditions would mark the passage of time throughout the year. Back to school week in the fall with activities to welcome everyone back. Winter formal dance before winter break. spring festival when the weather gets nice again, end-of-year celebration when classes finish. These traditions would create structure and give students things to look forward to throughout the year. Let's talk about how technology would actually work at American magical schools, because this is a key difference. At Hogwarts, technology famously doesn't work well around magic. Electronics go haywire. But American wizards, being Americans, would probably see this as a problem to be solved rather than just accepting it. There would be research and development into magical technology or technological magic, creating devices that can function in magical environments. Maybe magical computers that run on enchantments rather than electricity. Communication devices that combine magical and technological principles. The goal would be to get the benefits of both magic and technology, rather than having to choose one or the other. Wi-Fi probably wouldn't work in the traditional sense, but there might be a magical equivalent. Some kind of magical network that allows information to be shared and accessed. Students might use crystal balls or enchanted mirrors that function like tablets, allowing them to browse magical websites, watch videos, communicate with each other. It wouldn't be exactly the same as regular internet, but it would serve similar purposes. Social media would definitely exist in some form. Magical Instagram where photos can move. Magical TikTok where spell tutorials and magical stunts go viral. Magical Twitter where people argue about magical politics and celebrities. The platforms might have different names, but the concept of social networking and sharing content online would absolutely be part of student life. This would create new challenges. Cyberbullying would be an issue. Misinformation spreading through magical social media. Students being distracted by their devices during class. Schools would have to develop policies around appropriate technology use. Maybe devices would be collected during certain classes. Maybe there would be apps that parents could use to monitor their kids' magical phone usage. All the same technology issues that non-magical schools deal with. The advantage would be that students are more connected. They can stay in touch with family and friends more easily. They can access information quickly when they need it for assignments. They can document their school experiences and share them. Communication is faster and more convenient. The magical world would feel less isolated from the rest of modern life. Let's talk about romance and dating culture in more depth because this would be significantly different. At Hogwarts, dating seems to be relatively rare and kind of a big deal. When characters do date, it's often awkward and complicated. There's the whole asking someone to the Yule Ball situation. Not a lot of guidance about healthy relationships or consent or anything like that. American magical schools would approach this very differently, especially in the modern era where there's much more awareness about healthy relationships and consent. There would probably be health classes that include content on relationships, consent, communication, and sexual health appropriate for the age group. This is standard in American schools now, and magical schools would include it too, adapted for the magical context. Dating would be more casual and common. Students would go on coffee dates to the local magical cafe, study dates in the library that may or may not be actual dates, group hangouts that turn into pairing off. Dating apps or magical equivalents might exist for older students. The whole culture would be more open and relaxed about romantic relationships. School dances would be major venues for romantic drama. Asking someone to homecoming or prom would be a whole thing. Grand romantic gestures, creative proposals, the possibility of rejection. Who's going with who would be the subject of endless gossip and speculation. There would be drama when relationships ended right before a dance and someone needed a new date. The school would have to have policies around public displays of affection. Probably something like PDA is allowed within reason, but if it's making other people uncomfortable, take it elsewhere. There would be supervision to make sure things don't get too out of hand, but also recognition that teenagers are going to be teenagers, and policing every interaction isn't practical or appropriate. Relationships ending would be messy sometimes, as they are for teenagers everywhere, but there would be more support systems in place. School counselors who could help students process breakups, friends providing support, maybe even programs or workshops on healthy relationships and how to end them respectfully. The goal would be to help students learn relationship skills that will serve them throughout their lives. Let's talk about magic itself and how it might be approached differently. In the Harry Potter series, magic is largely traditional and based on knowledge passed down through generations. You learn specific spells with specific wand movements and incantations. It's very structured and rule-based. American magical education might have a different philosophy. There would probably be more emphasis on innovation and experimentation. The American mindset is all about improving things, finding better ways, pushing boundaries. So students would be encouraged not just to learn existing spells, but to modify them, combine them, maybe even create new ones. There would be classes on magical innovation and spell creation. The scientific method would be applied to magic. Conducting experiments, testing hypotheses, documenting results, peer review. Magic would be treated as something that can be studied and understood systematically, not just something mysterious and unknowable. This might take some of the mystique out of magic, but it would also empower students to really understand what they're doing and why it works. Practical application would be emphasized constantly. Americans are pragmatic. We want to know what we can do with knowledge, how we can use it in the real world. So every lesson would be tied to practical applications. When you learn a spell, you also learn what it's used for professionally, how it applies to various careers, real-world scenarios where you might need it. The question, when will I ever use this, would be anticipated and answered proactively. There might be more acceptance of different magical approaches. Native American magical traditions, African American hoodoo and root work, Latin American brujeria, Asian magical practices brought by immigrant wizards. Instead of one dominant British magical tradition, American magical education might incorporate multiple traditions and acknowledge that there are many valid approaches to magic. This would be controversial, and there would definitely be debates about cultural appropriation and authenticity, but the conversation would be happening. Wandless magic might be taught more extensively. American wizards might see wands as tools rather than necessities. Students would learn to channel magic without wands as well as with them. This would be seen as increasing versatility and preparedness. You never know when you might not have your wand available, so better to have multiple ways of using your magic. Now let's think about what happens after graduation, because the post-school world would be so different. Hogwarts students graduate and then go directly into careers in the wizarding world. There's not really a concept of magical higher education beyond Hogwarts. But in America, the education would continue for many students. There would be magical colleges and universities for students who want to continue their education. 4-year programs leading to bachelor's degrees in magical fields. Graduate programs for advanced study. Professional schools for specific careers like magical law or healing. The whole higher education system would mirror the American non-magical education system. Choosing a college would be a huge deal. Students would apply to multiple schools and then agonize over which one to attend. College visits would happen, where prospective students tour campuses and try to figure out where they fit. There would be early decision and regular decision deadlines. The whole stressful process of college admissions that American high school students go through. Some students would choose not to go to magical college. They might go straight into the workforce, pursuing careers that don't require additional education. Others might attend trade schools or specialized training programs. Gap years might be taken, where students travel or work for a year before deciding what to do next. The point is, there would be options, multiple paths forward rather than one expected route. Student debt would unfortunately be a reality for many. Magical colleges would be expensive and not everyone could afford to pay out of pocket. So students would take out loans, just like in the non-magical world. They would graduate with debt hanging over them, affecting their career choices and life decisions. This is a grim reality of American higher education that would probably exist in magical education too. Career counseling would start early and be taken seriously. Students would think about career paths from a young age. They might do internships during summer breaks to get experience. Job fairs would be held on campus where magical companies and organizations come to recruit. Resume workshops, interview prep, networking events, all the career preparation that happens at American schools. Alumni networks would be powerful. Graduating from a prestigious magical school would open doors throughout your career. Alumni would help other alumni get jobs, make connections, advance professionally. There would be alumni events and reunions where graduates come back to network and reminisce. The school ties you formed as a student would potentially help you for the rest of your professional life. Let's talk about scandals and controversies because every American school has them. At Hogwarts, there are certainly dramatic events, but the school's response is often questionable. Dangerous situations are downplayed. Problems are swept under the rug. Communication with parents and the broader community is minimal. American schools couldn't get away with this, at least not as easily. When something goes wrong at an American magical school, there would be investigations. Internal reviews of what happened and why. possibly external investigations by magical government agencies if the situation is serious enough. There would be accountability, people losing their jobs if they were negligent. Policies would be reviewed and updated to prevent similar incidents. The magical media would be all over any major scandal. Reporters camped outside the school.
Interviews with parents and students.
Op-eds about what it all means. Social media would explode with hot takes and speculation. The school's reputation could be seriously damaged by how they handle or mishandle a crisis. Parents would be furious if their children were put in danger and would demand answers. There might be lawsuits, definitely angry parent meetings where the administration has to face tough questions. The era of just trusting that the school knows best and not asking questions would be over. Parents would expect transparency and accountability. Students themselves would be more likely to speak out. If they witness something wrong or experience mistreatment, they would be more empowered to report it, to tell their story, to demand change. Student activism could force the school to address issues they might prefer to ignore. Walkouts, protests, petitions, social media campaigns. Students would have more power to hold the institution accountable. Of course, there would also be overreactions and moral panics. Parents freaking out over things that aren't actually dangerous. Calls to ban certain classes or activities because they're seen as too risky. The pendulum could swing too far in the direction of safety and caution, to the point where it interferes with education. Finding the right balance would be an ongoing challenge. Let's dive even deeper into what daily student life would actually look like at an American magical school, because the details really matter here. Imagine waking up in your dorm room on a typical Tuesday morning. Your alarm goes off, not a magical charm that gently wakes you, but probably your phone or magical device playing whatever song you chose. Your roommate groans from across the room because you hit snooze 3 times already. This is already so different from the regimented wake-up schedule at Hogwarts. You check your phone and scroll through magical social media while still lying in bed. Your feed shows friends from other magical schools posting about their classes, some drama happening between students at a rival school, a viral video of someone's spell gone hilariously wrong. You see that your crush posted a new photo and you spend way too long trying to decide if you should like it or if that would be too obvious. This is the reality of teenage life in the modern era, even for wizards. Eventually you drag yourself out of bed and head to the bathroom. If you're in a traditional dorm, you're sharing a bathroom with a bunch of other students. There's always that one person who takes forever in the shower. Someone's toiletries have exploded all over the counter because they tried to magically organize them and the spell went wrong. The mirrors are enchanted to be extra honest, which is great when you need real feedback on your outfit, but terrible when you're already feeling insecure about how you look. Getting dressed is its own adventure. If your school has a uniform, you're trying to figure out how to make it look good while staying within the dress code. Maybe you add your own accessories, charm your shoes to be a different color, style your hair in a specific way. If there's no uniform, you're dealing with the eternal teenage question of what to wear. You're trying to look good but not like you're trying too hard. You're considering the weather, what classes you have, who you might run into. It's the same struggle teenagers everywhere face, magical or not. Breakfast options depend on your school. At a larger school with a cafeteria, you grab your student ID card and head to the dining hall. The breakfast spread is extensive because Americans love breakfast options. There's a cereal bar with like 20 different cereals, a pancake and waffle station where you can watch them being made fresh, an omelet station where you tell the chef what you want in it, fresh fruit, yogurt, bagels, breakfast sandwiches, hash browns. There's a coffee bar that's absolutely packed because college students run on caffeine, magical or not. Some students are in line for the 4th time this week getting their complicated magical latte with extra espresso shots and flavor enchantments. You sit with your friends at your usual table. The dining hall is loud with hundreds of conversations happening at once. You're all complaining about the test you have later, discussing weekend plans, gossiping about who hooked up at last night's party. Someone's showing everyone a meme on their phone that perfectly captures how you all feel about your history of American magic class. Another friend is stress-eating pancakes because they have 3 assignments due today and haven't started any of them. This is the social fabric of school life. These daily interactions that build relationships and create community. Between classes, the campus is buzzing with activity. Students are rushing to make it to their next class on time. Some are on broomsticks or magical skateboards trying to get across campus quickly. Others are walking in groups, still chatting about whatever. Some students are camped out in the library or coffee shop, working on assignments between classes. The quad or main campus area has students lounging on the grass when weather permits, playing frisbee, or just hanging out. This is the American college experience translated to magical education. Let's talk about what an actual class looks like, because this would be so different from the Hogwarts classroom experience. You walk into your practical spellcasting class, and the room is set up more like a modern classroom than a medieval dungeon. There are desks or tables arranged in rows or clusters. There's a smartboard or its magical equivalent at the front where the professor can display information, show videos, pull up diagrams. The lighting is normal fluorescent or LED lights, not torches and candlelight. It's designed for learning, not atmosphere. The professor walks in carrying a coffee from the campus coffee shop. She's wearing normal clothes, maybe jeans and a blazer, not flowing robes. She sets up her laptop or magical tablet, pulls up her presentation for the day. Class starts with her asking if anyone has questions about the reading assignment from last night. A few hands go up. She addresses their questions, encouraging them to think critically about what they read. This is the Socratic method, the back-and-forth dialogue that's common in American education. Then she launches into the day's lesson. She's not just lecturing at you for an hour. She's using multiple teaching methods. There's some direct instruction where she explains concepts. Then there's a demonstration where she shows the spell in action. Then there's guided practice where you try it yourself with her walking around offering help and feedback. Then maybe pair work where you practice with a partner. The class is interactive and engaging, designed to accommodate different learning styles and keep students' attention. Throughout the class, students are taking notes on laptops or tablets or magical equivalents. Some are still old school with pen and paper. Everyone has their own system. The professor encourages questions, and there's a pretty casual rapport. Students feel comfortable raising their hands to ask for clarification or to offer different perspectives. Sometimes there's playful banter between the professor and students. The atmosphere is professional but not stuffy or intimidating. The class ends with the professor assigning homework. It's not just practice the spell 50 times. It's a more complex assignment that requires you to think critically. Maybe you have to write a short essay analyzing the practical applications of the spell in different careers. Maybe you have to research the history of how the spell was developed and present your findings. Maybe you have to work with a group to create a presentation comparing this spell to similar spells from other magical traditions. The assignments are designed to develop multiple skills, not just rote memorization. After class, students swarm the professor with questions. She holds mini office hours right there in the hallway, answering questions about the assignment, providing extra help to students who are struggling, discussing recommendations for students interested in pursuing this field professionally. She reminds everyone that her official office hours are on Wednesdays and Thursdays if they need more help. This accessibility is key in American education. Professors are expected to be available and supportive, not distant and unapproachable. Lunchtime is its own social event. The dining hall is packed and finding a table can be a challenge. There's a hierarchy to seating that develops naturally. The popular athletes sit together. The theater kids have their section. Different friend groups have their claimed territories. Freshmen are trying to figure out where they fit. It's like a high school cafeteria, but with magic and older students. The dynamics are complex and constantly shifting as relationships form and dissolve. The food options at lunch are even more extensive than breakfast. Multiple entree stations with different cuisines. A salad bar that's actually good. A sandwich and wrap station. A pizza station that always has a line. A dessert section that's dangerous if you're trying to eat healthy. And of course, more coffee because afternoon classes require caffeine reinforcement. Students with dietary restrictions or preferences can always find something that works for them because American dining services have gotten pretty good at accommodating different needs. You're sitting with your friends, complaining about your morning classes, making plans for the evening. Someone suggests going to the campus gym later for a pickup game of magical basketball. Someone else wants to study for tomorrow's test and is trying to organize a study group. Another friend is stressed about an audition for the school play and needs everyone's support. You're all checking your phones periodically, responding to texts, scrolling through social media, living that connected life even while having face-to-face conversations. Afternoon classes follow a similar pattern to morning classes, but everyone's a bit more tired. The 1:30 to 3 o'clock time slot is brutal. Everyone's fighting the post-lunch slump. Professors know this and try to make their afternoon classes extra engaging, but it's still a struggle. The 3:30 to 5 class is better because you're getting your second wind. Plus, it's almost done for the day, so there's light at the end of the tunnel. Let's talk about studying and academic life outside of class because this is where students spend so much of their time. The library at an American magical school would be incredible. It would be huge. Multiple floors, different sections for different purposes. There would be quiet study areas where silence is enforced. Group study rooms where students can work together and talk without bothering others. Computer labs with magical computers for research and assignments. Special collections with rare magical texts that you need permission to access. Maybe even a coffee shop inside the library because students need fuel for those long study sessions. The library would be open late, maybe even 24 hours during exam periods. You'd see students camped out at tables surrounded by books and papers and empty coffee cups. Study groups occupying the group rooms, arguing about the correct interpretation of some magical theory. Students falling asleep on their books because they've been there for 6 hours straight. The library becomes a second home during busy times of the semester. But students don't just study in the library. They study everywhere. In their dorm rooms with music playing and snacks within reach. In the dining hall during off-peak hours when it's quieter. In the campus coffee shops, which are always full of students with laptops and textbooks. Outside on benches when the weather's nice. Some students even study in bed, which is dangerous because it's so easy to fall asleep when you're too comfortable. Study groups are a huge part of academic life. Students form study groups for their difficult classes, meeting regularly to review material, quiz each other, work through practice problems together. These groups are both academic and social. You're learning, but you're also bonding with your classmates. Some study groups are super focused and efficient. Others spend half the time getting distracted and chatting about non-academic stuff. Both types have value. The pressure to perform academically is constant. There are students who are pre-med or pre-law or whatever the magical equivalents are, and they need perfect grades to get into graduate programs. There are students on academic scholarships who need to maintain a certain GPA to keep their funding. There are students whose parents are putting enormous pressure on them to succeed. There are students who put pressure on themselves because they're perfectionists or because they've tied their self-worth to their academic performance. This pressure manifests in different ways. Some students are constantly stressed, always worried about their grades, never satisfied with their performance even when they're doing well. Some students burn out, hitting a wall where they just can't keep pushing themselves anymore. Some students resort to shortcuts, using magical cheating methods or plagiarizing or whatever, which of course has serious consequences when they're caught. The school tries to provide support through counseling services and academic advisors, but the culture of achievement and competition is powerful. At the same time, there's also a counterculture of students who reject this pressure. Students who insist that grades don't define them, who prioritize their mental health and social life over academic perfection. Students who are there to learn and grow as people, not just to collect achievements for their resume. These students might not have the highest GPAs, but they often have richer, more balanced college experiences. They're the ones actually enjoying themselves, making memories, figuring out who they are. Let's talk way more about the weekend experience because weekends define so much of student life and culture. Friday afternoon, when that last class ends, there's this collective sigh of relief that spreads across campus. You can feel the energy shift. Students are already mentally checked out, thinking about the next 2 days of freedom. Professors can sense it too, which is why Friday afternoon classes tend to be shorter or more relaxed. Nobody wants to be there, so everyone makes the best of it. The transformation that happens between Friday at 3 in the afternoon and Friday at 9 at night is remarkable. The campus that was buzzing with academic energy is now pulsing with social energy. Dorm rooms become staging areas for the night ahead. Music is blasting from multiple rooms. You can smell various potions being brewed, some for legitimate purposes, and some definitely not. There's laughter echoing through the halls. Friends are popping in and out of each other's rooms, borrowing clothes, sharing makeup, hyping each other up for the night ahead. The pre-game is almost as important as the actual party. This is when friend groups gather, usually in someone's room, to drink a bit before heading out. It saves money since you don't have to drink as much at the actual party. But more than that, it's bonding time. You're listening to music, taking photos, playing drinking games, telling stories, getting progressively louder and more excited. Someone's always the designated parent friend making sure everyone eats something and stays hydrated. Someone else is the hype person getting everyone pumped up. There's the person who takes forever to get ready and everyone's waiting on. These dynamics play out every weekend. When you finally leave for the party, You're traveling in packs for safety and fun. Walking across campus on a Friday night is its own experience. You see other groups heading to other parties. Maybe you know them, maybe you don't. But there's this sense of collective excitement. Everyone's out to have a good time. The campus has a completely different vibe than during the week. The serious academic atmosphere is replaced by pure social energy. Arriving at a party is always a moment. You can hear the music from down the street. There are people standing outside smoking or vaping or just getting air. You navigate your way inside and it's packed. Bodies everywhere. The music is so loud you can barely hear the person next to you talking. It's hot from all the people crammed into a space that's definitely over capacity. But somehow this is fun. This is college. This is what you came here for, at least partly. The party has different zones and they serve different purposes. The dance floor is where people are really letting loose, dancing in ways they might be embarrassed about tomorrow when they see the videos. The music is usually a mix of current hits, throwbacks, and songs that everyone knows the words to. When that one song comes on that everyone loves, the whole room erupts. Strangers are singing together, arms around each other, having a moment. This is the magic of college parties. These spontaneous connections with people you might not even talk to in other contexts. Then there's the quieter area, usually a different room or outside, where people are having actual conversations. This is where you end up if you want to talk to someone you're interested in, or if you're just exhausted from dancing and need a break. The conversations here range from deep philosophical discussions to absolute nonsense, depending on how much people have had to drink and who they're talking to. You make weird connections at parties. You end up having hour-long conversations with people you barely know about topics you never discuss in normal life. The kitchen is always the hub of activity. This is where the drinks are, so there's constant traffic. People are mixing drinks, grabbing beers from the fridge, trying to make their way through the crowd. The kitchen is also where you run into people you know. It's like a social checkpoint. You stop and chat with friends you haven't seen in a while, make plans to hang out, promise to text each other even though you probably won't remember in the morning. There's something about the kitchen at a party that makes it the perfect place for these brief but meaningful interactions. The bathroom line is its own social scene. You're standing there with strangers or friends all waiting, commiserating about how long it's taking. The girls' bathroom line is infamous. Women bond in bathroom lines. Compliments are exchanged, numbers are traded, friendships are formed. Someone's always crying in the bathroom at a party and complete strangers rally to comfort them. Someone's always fixing their makeup or outfit. The bathroom becomes this weird safe space in the chaos of the party. As the night goes on, the party evolves. Some people leave early because they're tired or not feeling it. Others arrive late because they were at different parties first. By midnight or 1 in the morning, the party is usually at its peak. This is when things get really wild. Inhibitions are lowered. People are making decisions they might regret tomorrow. Hookups are happening in bedrooms and dark corners. Drama is unfolding. Someone's crying about their ex. Someone else is getting into an argument. The designated sober friends are trying to manage their drunk friends and make sure everyone's okay. By 2 or 3 in the morning, the party is winding down. The music might still be playing, but the crowd has thinned significantly. The diehards are still there, not ready for the night to end. But most people are heading home, stumbling back across campus in groups, supporting each other, laughing about the night's events. Some people are stopping for late-night food because drunk hunger is real and powerful. The magical equivalent of a pizza place or taco truck is doing booming business. Getting back to your dorm and finally collapsing into bed feels amazing. You're exhausted, your feet hurt from dancing or walking, your ears are ringing from the loud music, but you're happy. You're scrolling through photos and videos from the night, texting with friends about funny moments, already creating the mythology of this particular party that you'll reference for weeks or months to come. Eventually you pass out, still in some of your clothes, knowing you're going to feel rough tomorrow, but not caring in the moment. Saturday morning is rough for a lot of students. Hangovers are a real thing and they're not fun. People are waking up late, groaning, swearing they're never drinking again, even though they definitely will. The dining hall at breakfast is mostly empty except for athletes who had early practice and the responsible students who went to bed early. Everyone else is still sleeping or suffering in their rooms. By early afternoon, campus comes back to life. Students are emerging from their dorms, squinting in the sunlight, heading to get food and coffee. The collective recovery process is underway. Friend groups are gathering to debrief about the previous night. Who hooked up with who? Did you see what happened between those two people? Can you believe that thing that happened? The post-party analysis is almost as important as the party itself. Saturday afternoon and evening offer a chance to reset. Some students use this time to be productive, getting work done that they ignored during the week or catching up on readings. Others focus on self-care, going to the gym, doing laundry, cleaning their room, meal prepping if they have kitchen access. Still others just relax, watching movies or shows, playing games, napping, letting their bodies and minds recover from the week and the night before. But Saturday night is another party night for many students. Maybe not as intense as Friday, maybe a different vibe, but the social scene continues. Some students go out both nights, others pick one or the other. Some students don't party at all and spend their weekends in entirely different ways, pursuing hobbies, working on personal projects, taking weekend trips off campus, visiting friends at other schools, or just enjoying downtime in ways that don't involve alcohol and loud music. Sunday has a very specific feeling. It's the day when reality starts creeping back in. You've had your fun, now you need to prepare for the week ahead. Sunday brunch is a major social event, as we've discussed. The dining hall is packed with students gathering for leisurely meals, recovering from the weekend, mentally preparing for Monday. There's a ritual quality to Sunday brunch. It marks the transition from weekend mode back to weekday mode. Sunday afternoon is when the panic sets in for some students. The assignments they've been ignoring all weekend are suddenly very urgent. The test on Monday that they haven't studied for becomes impossible to ignore. The library fills up with students in various stages of stress and denial. Some people are very focused, working diligently, making up for lost time. Others are still in denial, scrolling through their phones, chatting with friends, occasionally looking at their work, but not really engaging with it. Sunday evening has a melancholy quality. The weekend is ending. Tomorrow it starts all over again. There's this low-level anxiety that settles over campus. Students are finalizing their work, preparing materials for Monday classes, setting alarms, mentally gearing up for another week. Some students meal prep for the week ahead if they have that option. Others are organizing their spaces, doing laundry, trying to start the week with a clean slate. Sunday night is when you make promises to yourself about the upcoming week. This week will be different. This week you'll go to all your classes and pay attention. This week you'll start assignments early instead of waiting until the last minute. This week you'll eat better and exercise and get enough sleep. These promises are made with genuine intention, even though you know from experience that the week will probably look a lot like the previous weeks. But the optimism of Sunday night is important. It gives you hope and motivation to face another week. Let's talk extensively about exam periods because these are some of the most intense times in the academic year. In the weeks leading up to midterms or finals, the entire campus atmosphere changes. The usual balance between academics and social life shifts dramatically toward academics. The library is packed at all hours. Students who never went to the library suddenly become fixtures there. The coffee shops have lines out the door as students fuel their study marathons with caffeine. Study groups form and reform as students realize they need help or want to help others. There's a certain camaraderie that develops during exam periods. Everyone is suffering together, which creates bonds. You're more likely to have genuine conversations with classmates you barely talk to all semester because you're in the same boat, trying to learn the same material, feeling the same stress. People share notes and study guides, quiz each other, explain concepts in different ways until they click. The stress is palpable and pervasive. You can see it in students' faces, hear it in their voices, feel it in the air. People are sleeping less, eating worse, skipping exercise, ignoring their mental health. The pressure to perform well is enormous. For some students, entire future plans depend on these exams. Their GPA, their scholarship, their grad school aspirations, it all comes down to how well they perform during this concentrated period. Some students handle exam stress reasonably well. They made study plans in advance. They've been keeping up with material throughout the semester. They know what to expect. They're stressed but not panicking. They study methodically, take breaks, maintain some semblance of self-care. These students often become informal tutors during exam periods, helping friends and classmates who are struggling more. Other students are barely holding it together. They fell behind during the semester and now they're trying to learn weeks or months of material in a few days. They're pulling all-nighters, surviving on energy drinks and stress, cramming information into their brains and hoping it sticks long enough to get through the exam. They're having breakdowns in the library, crying in bathroom stalls, questioning every decision that led them to this moment. The struggle is real and visible. All-nighters become common during exam periods, even though everyone knows they're not actually effective study strategies. There's something about the desperation of exam week that makes staying up all night studying seem like a good idea. The library at 3 in the morning during finals week is a special kind of place. The regular students are long gone. What remains is a collection of stressed, exhausted, slightly delirious individuals all fighting to stay awake and retain information. There's a weird energy to late-night study sessions. Everything seems funnier than it should be because you're so tired. You bond with the other people who are also there at absurd hours. You take breaks together, complain together, quiz each other. You see the sun come up through the library windows and you're not sure if you should feel accomplished or ashamed. You've been studying all night, but did you actually learn anything, or were you just staring at words on a page while your brain shut down? The day of an exam is nerve-wracking. You're reviewing notes up until the last minute, testing yourself on definitions and formulas and concepts, hoping you remember everything when it matters. You're trying to stay calm, but your heart is racing. You're giving yourself pep talks. You've got this. You studied. You're prepared. But there's always that voice of doubt, wondering if you studied the right things, if you'll remember when you're sitting in front of the exam, if you'll run out of time. Walking into the exam room is intense. The atmosphere is tense and silent. Everyone's focused on what's about to happen. You find your seat, get your materials ready, wait for the exam to be distributed. Those final moments before the exam starts feel endless. Your mind is racing through everything you studied, trying to hold on to information, worried you're forgetting important things. When the exam finally starts, there's a strange mix of relief and renewed panic. Relief that the waiting is over. Panic that now you actually have to perform. You read through the questions, trying to gauge how difficult it is, making a mental plan for how to approach it. Some questions you know immediately, which is encouraging. Others make you panic because you don't remember or don't understand. You have to manage your time, decide what to focus on, keep moving forward even when you're stuck. During the exam, the room is silent except for scratching pens, turning pages, occasional sighs or groans. You can feel the collective stress. Someone always finishes early, which makes everyone else panic. Are they done because it was easy or because they gave up? You try not to compare yourself to others, but it's hard not to wonder how everyone else is doing. When time is called and you have to put your pen down, there's a massive release of tension. It's over. For better or worse, it's done. You can't change anything now. You leave the exam room feeling some combination of relief, exhaustion, pride, and dread. You immediately start talking with classmates about it. What did you put for question 5? How did you interpret that prompt? The post-exam analysis helps you process, but also sometimes makes you realize mistakes you made, which is torture. After exams, there's a celebration period before grades come out. You're done with the hard part. You can relax. Students go out, parties happen, everyone's blowing off steam. There's joy in being finished regardless of how well you actually did. The campus atmosphere shifts again, back towards social and recreational rather than academic stress. People are smiling again, laughing, enjoying life. Then grades come out and reality hits. Some students are thrilled with their results, validated that their hard work paid off. Others are disappointed, maybe devastated, facing consequences for their performance. Some students are surprised in either direction. Grades spark all sorts of reactions and emotions. Some students share their grades with friends, others keep them private. There's comparison and competition, but also support and commiseration. Let's talk about the role of Greek life in much more extensive detail, because at schools where it exists, it's a major part of campus culture. The Greek system, meaning fraternities and sororities, is a distinctly American institution that would definitely exist at some magical schools. These organizations are social groups with their own houses, traditions, and hierarchies. They're controversial, but influential. Rush Week is when new students can explore Greek life and potentially join an organization. For fraternities, Rush might be relatively informal, with prospective members visiting different houses, attending events, meeting current members. For sororities, Rush is often much more formal and structured. There are multiple rounds, dress codes, strict rules about what can and cannot be discussed. The whole process is intense and can be emotionally draining. During Rush, both sides are evaluating each other. The organizations are assessing whether they want to extend bids to prospective members. The prospective members are trying to figure out where they fit, which organization's values and culture resonate with them. It's a mutual selection process, but one with significant power imbalances because the organizations hold most of the power. For students who receive bids and decide to join, there's a pledging period. This is when new members learn about the organization's history and traditions, bond with their pledge class, and prove their commitment. Pledging can range from meaningful bonding experiences to hazing situations that cross ethical and legal lines. This varies dramatically between organizations and schools. The best Greek organizations focus on scholarship, leadership, service, and genuine brotherhood or sisterhood. They provide structure and support for their members. They organize community service projects, maintain high GPA requirements, offer networking opportunities with alumni, create lasting friendships. For many students, their fraternity or sorority becomes their primary social circle and support system throughout college and beyond. But Greek life has significant problems. Hazing is a real issue despite being officially banned. Stories of dangerous, humiliating, or abusive pledging rituals occasionally make headlines. Excessive drinking is often associated with Greek culture, leading to alcohol poisoning, sexual assault, and other serious incidents. The exclusivity of the system can create divisions on campus between Greeks and non-Greeks. Greek houses often host the biggest parties on campus. They have dedicated spaces for social events, budgets for supplies and entertainment, and reputations to uphold. A big fraternity party might have themes, decorations, DJ or live music, extensive alcohol, and hundreds of attendees. These parties are legendary and form a significant part of campus social mythology. The social hierarchy within Greek life is complex and sometimes toxic. Some organizations are considered top tier, others are middle or bottom tier. These rankings are based on arbitrary factors like attractiveness of members, coolness of parties, athletic involvement, or historical prestige. The ranking system creates competition and judgment that can be harmful. Within each organization, there are also hierarchies. Seniors have more status than juniors, juniors more than sophomores. Certain positions like president or social chair hold more prestige. Some members are more popular or influential than others. These internal dynamics can create tension and drama. Greek life also has issues with diversity and inclusion. Historically, many Greek organizations were segregated by race. While that's officially changed, de facto segregation still exists at many schools. There are historically black fraternities and sororities, Latino organizations, Asian American organizations, and predominantly white organizations. Integration remains a challenge. For students in Greek life, it becomes a major time commitment. There are weekly chapter meetings, mandatory events, social obligations, service hours. It can feel like a part-time job. Some students love this and thrive on the structure and involvement. Others feel overwhelmed and struggle to balance Greek commitments with academics and other interests. Formal events are a big part of Greek culture. These are semi-formal or formal dances where members bring dates. There's often a weekend trip involved, with the whole organization going to a destination together. Formals are expensive, elaborate affairs that members look forward to all semester. Asking someone to formal is a whole thing, with creative proposals and lots of stress about finding the right date. Greek organizations also participate in recruitment for their philanthropy events. They might host fundraisers, awareness campaigns, or service projects related to their national philanthropy. This is the part of Greek life that gets the most positive attention, showing that these organizations can make meaningful contributions to communities. The alumni networks from Greek organizations are powerful. Many successful professionals are members of Greek organizations, and they help other members with job opportunities, internships, advice, and connections. This old boys network aspect of Greek life is both a benefit for members and a source of inequality for non-members. Living in a Greek house is its own experience. These houses can be mansions with dozens of people living together. You have your own room or share with one or more people. There are common areas, a dining room where meals are served by house staff, a party basement or backyard. It's communal living on a large scale with all the joys and challenges that entails. For students not in Greek life, there can be resentment about the space, resources, and social capital that Greek organizations command. They wonder why these exclusive clubs get such nice houses and so much influence. They're frustrated when parties they want to attend are Greek only or require knowing someone who can get them in. The divide between Greeks and non-Greeks can be real and significant. Some schools have tried to ban or restrict Greek life because of the problems associated with it. These efforts are usually met with fierce resistance from alumni who are Greek and from current members. The organizations claim they've improved, that the bad behavior is in the past, that they're being unfairly targeted. The debate about whether Greek life should exist on college campuses continues. Let's explore athletic culture even more deeply, because sports are such a defining part of American school identity. Being a student athlete at an American magical school would be an incredible but demanding experience. You're not just a student or just an athlete, you're both, and you're expected to excel at both. The day in the life of a student athlete is grueling. You wake up early, often before sunrise, for morning practice or conditioning. You're tired because you were up late studying after evening practice the day before. You drag yourself to the training facility, your body sore from previous practices and games. But you push through because that's what athletes do. Morning practice is intense. Your coaches are demanding, pushing you to your limits. You're running drills, working on plays, building strength and conditioning. If it's game season, practice focuses on preparation for the next opponent. If it's off season, it's about building skills and staying in shape. Either way, it's exhausting physical work. After practice, you shower quickly and rush to class. You're probably still a bit sweaty, definitely tired, maybe nursing minor injuries. You try to pay attention in class, but your body is screaming for rest. You take notes, participate when you can, but your mind is split between the class material and thinking about what you need to work on athletically. Between classes, you might have training table, which is a meal specifically for athletes. The food is designed to fuel your body properly, lots of protein and healthy carbs and vegetables. You eat with your teammates, discussing practice, upcoming games, classes, life. These meals are bonding time, a chance to decompress a bit before the next obligation. Then you're back to classes or study hall. Many athletic programs require their athletes to attend supervised study hours to ensure they're keeping up academically. You sit in a quiet room with other athletes, working on homework, reading for class, preparing for exams. Academic advisors specifically for athletes check in on your progress, help you with any struggles. Make sure you're on track to graduate while maintaining eligibility. Afternoon or evening practice is another multi-hour commitment. Your body is tired from the morning, from classes, from everything. But you have to perform. Your coaches are watching, evaluating, deciding who gets playing time and who sits the bench. Your teammates are relying on you. You can't afford to slack off or show weakness. After evening practice, it's dinner, then homework and studying late into the night. You're exhausted, but you have assignments due, exams to prepare for, readings to complete. You stay up way too late trying to balance everything. When you finally get to sleep, it's only for a few hours before you have to wake up and do it all again. Game days are the payoff for all this work. The adrenaline, the excitement, the chance to compete and showcase your skills. You've been preparing all week for this opponent. You've studied film, practiced specific plays, visualized success. Now it's time to execute. The pre-game routine is sacred. Every athlete has their specific rituals. The music you listen to, the food you eat, the way you tape your ankles, the order you put on your uniform. These routines are superstitions, but they're also psychological preparation, getting your mind right for competition. In the locker room before the game, the energy is electric. Coaches give final instructions and motivational speeches. Team captains say their piece, firing up teammates. You're nervous but ready, anxious but confident. When you finally take the field or court, the crowd roaring, your school colors everywhere. It's an incredible rush. During the game, everything you've practiced comes together, or it doesn't. Sometimes you play brilliantly, executing perfectly, feeling like you can't miss. Other times you struggle, nothing works, and you're frustrated and disappointed. Sports are unpredictable and humbling. You learn as much from losses as from wins, maybe more. After the game, whether you won or lost, there's usually a brief celebration or mourning period. Then it's ice baths for sore muscles, treatment for any injuries sustained, post-game meals. Your body is wrecked but satisfied. You gave everything you had. Now you need to recover so you can do it again. Travel for away games is its own experience. You might take buses or magical transportation to other schools, sometimes traveling for hours. These trips are bonding time. You play cards, watch movies, listen to music, joke around, sleep. You stay in hotels, 2 to a room usually. There are team dinners at local restaurants. It's exhausting but also kind of fun, being on the road with your team. The pressure on athletes extends beyond just performance. You're representing your school. Your behavior reflects on the whole athletic program. There are rules about conduct, social media usage, public appearances. You're held to a higher standard than regular students in some ways. When you mess up, it's more visible, and the consequences are often more severe. Injuries are a constant worry for athletes. Every practice, every game carries the risk of injury that could sideline you temporarily or end your career permanently. Minor injuries are played through with pain medication and athletic tape. More serious injuries require medical evaluation, possibly surgery, definitely rehabilitation. Watching your team compete while you're injured is torture. The mental health challenges for athletes are significant and often overlooked. The pressure to perform, the physical pain, the time commitment, the public nature of your failures, it all takes a toll. Athletes might struggle with anxiety, depression, eating disorders, substance abuse. The culture of toughness in athletics sometimes prevents athletes from seeking help they desperately need. But there are incredible upsides to being a student athlete. The sense of accomplishment when you perform well, the bonds formed with teammates who become lifelong friends, the discipline and work ethic developed through athletics that serves you in all areas of life, the pride in representing your school and competing at a high level, the scholarship funding your education. For many athletes, these benefits far outweigh the costs. Let's talk more about food culture on campus because it's more significant than people realize. Food is community, comfort, fuel, and entertainment. The dining hall is a social hub where relationships are built over meals. What you eat, when you eat, who you eat with. These details matter in ways both obvious and subtle. The quality of dining hall food varies dramatically between schools. Some schools have legitimately good food with lots of variety and fresh ingredients prepared by skilled chefs. Others serve barely edible cafeteria food that students complain about constantly and mock in social media posts. Most fall somewhere in between, with some dishes that are actually pretty good and others that are best avoided. Either way, students develop strong opinions about dining hall food and bond over shared love or hatred of specific menu items that become part of campus culture and inside jokes. There are always signature dishes that become legendary on each campus. Maybe the dining hall makes incredible cookies that students swear by and get excited about whenever they appear. Maybe there's a specific entree that only appears occasionally but causes genuine excitement when it's on the menu. Maybe there's a truly terrible dish that becomes famous for how bad it is, something students dare each other to try or joke about constantly. These food items become part of campus culture and lore, referenced in conversation and remembered long after graduation. Special occasions merit special meals. The dining hall goes all out for Thanksgiving, trying to recreate that holiday feeling for students who can't go home. There's turkey and stuffing and all the traditional sides prepared as well as possible in a large-scale institutional setting. Students dress up a bit, take photos, appreciate the effort even if it's not quite like home. Similarly, other holidays bring themed foods and decorations. These special meals break up the routine and create memories that students look back on fondly. Late-night food options are crucial for college students who keep odd hours and have unpredictable hunger. Some schools have dining halls or cafes open late for studying students who need fuel. Others have food trucks or late-night delivery options that cater specifically to the college crowd. The magical equivalent of drunk food at 2 in the morning is a staple of college life. Making questionable food choices with friends at absurd hours is bonding, creating stories and memories that get referenced for years. Students with dietary restrictions face additional challenges that can significantly impact their experience. Not every dining hall is equipped to handle severe allergies or provide good vegetarian, vegan, kosher, or halal options. Students sometimes feel frustrated that their needs aren't being met, that they have to make special arrangements or supplement with food from elsewhere. Schools are getting better at accommodating diverse dietary needs, but there's still progress to be made, especially at smaller or less well-funded institutions. Food becomes a study tool in ways both productive and problematic. Study sessions involve snacks, usually unhealthy ones that provide quick energy and comfort. The library is full of students eating while they read and work, despite rules against it in some areas. Certain foods become associated with all-nighters or exam prep, comfort foods that provide psychological support during stressful times. Energy drinks and coffee are obvious examples that students consume in quantities that probably aren't healthy, but also easy foods that don't require much attention, that you can eat while focused on something else, that provide quick fuel for marathon study sessions. Cooking for yourself is a privilege and a challenge that students in different housing situations experience differently. Students in dorms without kitchens are limited to what can be made with a microwave or hot plate, which means a lot of ramen and easy mac and other processed foods. Students in apartments finally have full kitchens, but might lack the skills or time to cook properly, resulting in either learning experiences or continued reliance on easy processed foods. Learning to cook is part of growing up for many students. The first time you successfully make a meal you're proud of, that's actually good and not just edible. Feels like a major accomplishment and a step toward real adulthood. Care packages from home, especially ones with food, are treasured in ways that might seem disproportionate but reflect genuine emotional needs. Parents sending cookies or candy or regional specialties from home is an act of love that students deeply appreciate, a tangible connection to home and family during times of stress or homesickness. Sharing these treats with friends is a way of sharing your home and family with your college community. It's sweet and meaningful, creating bonds and introducing people to flavors and foods from different regions and cultures. Food delivery apps have changed college food culture significantly in recent years. Being able to order from dozens of restaurants and have it delivered right to your dorm is convenient but expensive, a luxury that not all students can afford regularly. Students splurge on delivery when they're too busy or tired to go out, when they're studying and don't want to lose momentum, when they're drunk and make impulsive food decisions, or when they just want to treat themselves. The ease of delivery can also be a crutch that prevents students from learning to cook or budgeting wisely. Meal plans are a source of frustration for many students who feel they're not getting good value. The declining balance never seems to last as long as it should, running out weeks before the semester ends. The meal swipes don't cover as much as you'd expect or can't be used at the places you actually want to eat. The pricing seems unreasonable, especially when you calculate cost per meal. Students try to game the system, stretching their meal plan as far as possible, figuring out hacks and strategies to maximize value, sharing tips with each other about how to make it work. Let's dive deeper into the relationship students form because these connections are often the most meaningful part of the college experience and shape who students become. The friends you make in college can become the most important people in your life, the people who truly know you in ways that even childhood friends might not. These are the people who see you at your worst, at your most vulnerable, at your most authentic, and love you anyway. The people who celebrate your successes without jealousy and support you through failures without judgment. Freshman year friendships form quickly out of necessity and proximity, born from shared uncertainty and the universal need for connection in an unfamiliar environment. You're all new and nervous and looking for people to sit with at meals, to study with, to navigate this new world alongside. Your dorm floor becomes your first community, a ready-made social circle. The people you eat meals with in those early weeks might become your best friends for life, or might fade away as you find your real people. There's a trial and error process to friendship in college that can be painful but is ultimately necessary for finding genuine connections. Best friendships are forged through shared experiences and challenges that test and strengthen bonds. Late-night conversations where you reveal your deepest fears and wildest dreams, where you talk about things you've never told anyone before. Supporting each other through breakups and family problems and academic stress and identity crises. Laughing until you cry over inside jokes that nobody else understands, references and moments that are uniquely yours. These intense shared experiences create bonds that last, friendships that can survive distance and time and life changes. Because they're built on genuine understanding and mutual support, friend groups form and reform throughout college as people grow and change and find their places. Maybe you have your main group from freshman year that started in your dorm. Then you join a club and make new friends there who share specific interests. You study abroad and bond with people from that transformative experience. You work a campus job with a new set of people who understand certain struggles. You accumulate different friend circles and sometimes they overlap and merge. And sometimes they stay separate, serving different needs and representing different parts of who you are. There's always drama in friend groups because you're dealing with young people figuring out who they are and how to maintain relationships while changing and growing. Someone feels left out or excluded from plans and gets hurt. Two people in the group start dating and it changes dynamics in ways both obvious and subtle. There's a fight or betrayal that causes a rift, forcing people to take sides or navigate complicated loyalties. Learning to navigate friendship drama, to communicate clearly, to set boundaries, to forgive and move forward. These are crucial skills developed through these sometimes painful experiences. Roommate relationships are unique and complicated in ways that other relationships aren't. You're living with someone in very close quarters, sharing space that might be quite small, dealing with each other's habits and quirks and moods constantly. Sometimes roommates become best friends, compatible in all the ways that matter, and appreciating each other's presence. Sometimes you tolerate each other and try to stay out of each other's way, maintaining a functional, if not particularly close relationship. Sometimes it's a disaster that requires intervention from RAs or housing staff and potentially room changes. Good roommates respect each other's space and schedules without needing constant reminders. They communicate about issues before they become big problems, addressing small annoyances before they build into resentment. They figure out systems for sharing responsibilities like cleaning and taking out trash. They deal with guests and overnight visitors in ways that work for both people. They find a balance between being friendly and respectful without demanding more closeness than the other person wants to give. It's a delicate dance that requires maturity and compromise and constant recalibration. Bad roommate situations can make you genuinely miserable in ways that affect your entire college experience. Someone who's messy in a shared space, leaving their stuff everywhere and never cleaning up. Someone who's loud when you're trying to sleep or study, showing no consideration for your needs. Someone who doesn't respect your belongings or privacy, borrowing things without asking or going through your stuff. Someone whose lifestyle or values or habits are fundamentally incompatible with yours in ways that create constant tension. These situations create stress that permeates everything, making it hard to relax in your own space, affecting your sleep and mental health and academic performance. Romantic relationships in college are intense and formative in ways that shape your understanding of love and partnership. You're figuring out what you want in a partner, what you'll tolerate and what's a deal breaker, what makes you happy and what makes you miserable. First serious relationships often happen in college, those early experiences with real intimacy and vulnerability. First loves that feel all-consuming and world-defining. First heartbreaks that devastate you and make you question everything. First experiences with real intimacy and vulnerability that teach you about trust and connection. It's a time of emotional development and growth that can be beautiful and painful, sometimes simultaneously. College relationships face unique challenges that test even strong partnerships. You're both changing and growing, sometimes in different directions, becoming different people than you were when you met. The pressure of academics and other commitments strains relationships, leaving less time and energy for each other. Being in a relationship in a social environment where there are constant temptations and opportunities for others, where you're surrounded by single people and party culture. Deciding whether to stay together after graduation when you might be moving to different cities or pursuing different paths. Facing the question of whether the relationship can survive distance and new circumstances. These are real challenges that test relationships, and not all survive. Some college relationships last and turn into marriages, becoming those success stories that people point to. These couples navigated the challenges successfully and built something lasting, finding ways to grow together instead of apart. They supported each other through the stress and changes and uncertainties of college and beyond. They're the proof that college relationships can work, that you can meet the person you'll spend your life with while you're still figuring out who you are. Other relationships end badly, sometimes spectacularly so. Cheating that shatters trust. Growing apart as people change and realize they want different things. Realizing that what you thought was love was actually just convenience or fear of being alone. Breakups in college are especially hard because you often can't escape your ex. You can't get clean distance and space to heal. You might live in the same dorm, take the same classes, have mutual friends who don't want to pick sides. You see them around campus regularly and it reopens the wound every time, making it impossible to move on cleanly. Learning to move on while still encountering your ex regularly is a special kind of torture that teaches you resilience and emotional regulation. Hookup culture exists and shapes relationship dynamics in ways both liberating and complicated. Casual sexual encounters without commitment or emotional involvement are common on college campuses, normalized in ways they might not have been in previous generations. This works great for some students who enjoy the freedom and lack of strings attached, who separate physical intimacy from emotional connection easily. Others find it unfulfilling and struggle with the emotional disconnect, wanting more intimacy and connection than casual encounters provide. Navigating hookup culture while staying true to your own values and desires is challenging, requiring self-knowledge and clear communication. Mentor relationships with professors or older students can be incredibly valuable and transformative. Having someone who's further along in their journey who takes interest in your development is powerful, providing guidance and perspective that peers can't offer. They provide encouragement when you're doubting yourself, opportunities that you wouldn't have access to otherwise, and perspective on challenges that seem insurmountable when you're in the middle of them. These relationships might be formal through official mentorship programs or informal connections that develop naturally through classes or shared interests. Either way, good mentors shape trajectories and open doors. So what if Hogwarts was in America? It would be bigger, more diverse, more competitive, more complicated than Hogwarts ever was, transformed by American values and culture in ways both obvious and subtle. It would reflect American values of choice, innovation, individualism, progress, and achievement, for better and for worse, for all the benefits and all the problems those values bring. It would have modern problems like mental health crises, social media drama, crushing student debt, and intense academic pressure that follows students like a shadow, creating stress and anxiety that's become normalized. The anxiety of performance would be constant, this background hum of pressure that never quite goes away. The pressure to succeed, to stand out, to build the perfect resume, to prepare for an uncertain future would weigh on students daily, shaping their choices and priorities. But it would also have incredible opportunities that students at Hogwarts could only dream of, resources and options that expand possibilities, robust support systems for those who need them, with counseling centers, academic advisors, peer support programs, career services, and resources for every type of challenge. A rich variety of experiences far beyond what one school could offer, with hundreds of clubs, organizations, sports, arts programs, and activities catering to every possible interest and identity. Communities built around every conceivable shared experience, where students can find their people no matter how niche their interests or backgrounds, creating spaces of belonging. Students would have more freedom to chart their own paths, to choose their majors and classes, to decide what kind of life they want to build, to experiment and make mistakes and figure things out. More resources to pursue their passions, whether that's magical research, athletic achievement, artistic expression, or social activism, with funding and facilities and support structures. More diverse communities to be part of, reflecting the beautiful complexity of American demographics and cultures, learning from people different from themselves, and more chances to discover who they really are, to experiment with identity, to make mistakes and learn from them, to grow and change in a relatively safe environment before the stakes get even higher. The magic itself might not be that different from what we see at Hogwarts. The same fundamental spells and potions and transfigurations that have existed for centuries, the same basic magical principles. But the experience of learning it, living it, growing up within this system, that would be fundamentally, distinctively, unmistakably American in every way imaginable. It would be chaotic and energizing, overwhelming and exciting, deeply flawed and full of possibility all at once, a beautiful mess. It would prepare students not just to use magic, but to navigate the complex, diverse, rapidly changing world they'll enter after graduation, giving them skills and connections and experiences that shape the rest of their lives in profound ways that extend far beyond spellcasting. The lessons learned would extend far beyond magical theory and spell work, encompassing emotional intelligence, cultural awareness, resilience, adaptability, networking, leadership, teamwork, time management, prioritization, and the ability to thrive in uncertainty and constant change. For better and for worse, and definitely for both in equal measure, American magical education would be its own kind of magic, a transformative force that creates experiences and memories that students carry with them forever, shaping who they become. It would create experiences and memories that students carry with them forever, that influence their choices and perspectives decades later, that they reference and remember and sometimes miss desperately. It would shape who they become as adults in ways both visible and invisible, influencing their careers and relationships and worldviews and values for decades to come, creating ripple effects throughout their entire lives. It would be overwhelming and amazing and challenging and unforgettable, just like the American college experience itself, capturing all its intensity and complexity. except with wands and spells and flying broomsticks mixed in, adding literal magic to an experience that's already magical in its own way, making it even more spectacular and complicated and memorable and transformative. The friendships formed would be deep and lasting, forged through shared struggles like all-night study sessions, impossible exams, relationship drama, personal crises, identity struggles, and celebrations of achievements big and small, creating bonds that survive distance and time. The lessons learned would stick with you, not just the academic knowledge, but the life lessons about perseverance, failure, success, identity, community, responsibility, and what really matters when everything else falls away. That's what Hogwarts in America would really be. Not just a school, but a crucible. A transformative experience that takes children and gradually shapes them into adults through challenges and support in roughly equal measure. Through struggle and celebration, through failure and success. A place where magic meets the messy, beautiful, complicated reality of American youth culture and education, creating something entirely new and uniquely powerful in the process. Something that couldn't exist anywhere else. A system that's imperfect and problematic in many ways, with real flaws and real consequences, but also full of opportunity and growth and community and magic in both the literal and metaphorical sense, in ways that enrich despite the difficulties. An experience that prepares you for life not by protecting you from challenges, but by giving you the tools and support to face them, by teaching you resilience and adaptability and self-knowledge. That's the magic of American education, magical or otherwise, and that's what Hogwarts would become if it existed in the United States, transformed and Americanized in every possible way. It would be bigger, louder, more diverse, more complicated, more stressed, more connected, more innovative, more traditional, more radical, more conservative, more everything than Hogwarts could ever be. Because that's what America does to everything it touches. It amplifies and complicates and transforms and somehow makes it uniquely, recognizably, undeniably American in ways both wonderful and terrible, both inspiring and exhausting, both magical and mundane, creating something new from something familiar. Thank you so much for joining me on this incredibly deep and extensive magical journey, reimagining what American magical education might look like in all its beautiful complexity and messiness. If you enjoyed this comprehensive exploration into an American Hogwarts, breaking down every aspect from academics to social life to athletics to relationships to food to mental health and everything in between, covering the full experience in detail, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more thought experiments and detailed explorations of the worlds we love, more deep dives into fascinating what-if scenarios. Drop a comment below telling me what you think would be the best and worst parts of attending an American magical school, or what aspects you'd want to see that I didn't cover. Though I think we covered pretty much everything imaginable at this point, leaving no stone unturned. Maybe you have ideas about specific American magical traditions, how different regions would approach magic differently, what the rivalry between schools would be like, or how American wizard culture would differ from British wizard culture in ways I haven't explored, angles we haven't considered. I'd love to hear your thoughts and continue this conversation because there are always more angles to explore, more details to consider, more what-if scenarios to imagine. We could talk about what American magical government would look like, how American wizards dealt with major historical events like the Revolutionary War or Civil War or World Wars, what the relationship between the magical and non-magical worlds would be during different eras of American history, how magical integration or segregation might have played out during the Civil Rights era, how the magical community deals with American political divisions and polarization, what magical sports beyond the ones we discussed might exist, how magical technology might develop differently in an American context, what American magical music and art and literature would be like, how magical transportation infrastructure would work across such a huge country, what regional magical cuisines and traditions exist in different parts of America, how magical creatures native to North America are different from those in Britain, what Native American magical traditions contribute to American magical culture, how immigration shaped American magical society across different waves and from different places, what magical slang and language Americans use compared to British magical terminology, how magical fashion differs from British magical fashion and reflects American sensibilities, and so many other fascinating topics that we could explore for hours. The possibilities are truly endless, and I'm excited to keep exploring them with you in future videos because this world is so rich. Until next time, Keep imagining, keep questioning, keep exploring the infinite possibilities that exist when we combine familiar worlds with new perspectives, creating something fresh. And remember that magic exists wherever we choose to find it. Whether that's in a castle in Scotland, a campus in California, or right here in the incredible power of imagination and storytelling that lets us create entire worlds in our minds and share them with others. Thanks so much for watching this extremely long and detailed video. I really appreciate you sticking with me through this entire journey from start to finish. And I'll see you in the next video where we'll explore another fascinating what-if scenario that pushes the boundaries of imagination.